Hello, and welcome to the Content Minds. My name is Ryan Broderick, and I'm outside.
My name is Luke, and I'm also outside because we're physically in the same space together.
We're sitting on a park bench, and is this Houston?
This is Houston. This is Tavistock Square.
And it looks like it's as sunny as it could possibly be at the end of April in London.
Yeah, the sky has no color. It's one of the it's like the sky hasn't loaded properly, which is it's classic British weather.
So, Luke, what have you been doing with your free time?
I'm working mostly. I mean, we should probably introduce the podcast in terms of like what's happened. So we obviously ended the podcast 4 months ago now. 5 months ago? 5 months. About that time ago. Part of the reason that we ended the podcast was because we were bored of talking about Elon Musk and AI. And the only two tech news stories in the last 4 months have been Elon Musk and AI.
I've been using my free time to learn Portuguese.
That's fun.
And I've also just been enjoying my podcast, Free Life. Unfortunately, I still am writing about Elon Musk and AI all the goddamn time. But it is slightly easier not to have to then talk about it after I'm done writing about it.
Yeah, that's fair. That does seem easier.
So what do you think? This Elon Musk guy, is he gonna save Twitter?
I mean, I think the conclusion after 4 months is that it's a lot worse. In essentially every conceivable way.
This was not on purpose, but I got an invite to Blue Sky this morning, and I got to try it.
I am really interested by Blue Sky. Have you got any spare invites?
I will get one in 2 weeks.
Okay.
Because they give you one invite every 2 weeks. And apparently something happened recently where one of the weird Twitter shitposters got a bunch of invites and brought everybody over. And so now it's absolute chaos.
But good chaos.
Yeah. So up until, I guess, 2 days ago, it was all devs and Silicon Valley people. And now they're being bullied off the site by degenerate weirdos.
I mean, that's the dream. Yeah, no, Blue Sky sounds really good. I'm very, very curious about their kind of moderation approach because I think it makes it just makes a lot of sense. Like having the gist of Blue Sky, I think, if you haven't heard of it, is kind of that you can subscribe to different moderation schemes.
I'll be honest, I don't know. It doesn't have drafts. Your post, if you don't finish it before you leave the app, disappears. There's not a lot of bells and whistles. It's basically two feeds. There's the feed of people you follow and a what's new feed, which kind of feels like basically a public feed, more or less. It feels like everyone's just in there. But that's it. I don't even think you do videos, to be honest.
I mean, that's good. There are too many videos on Twitter. But the public feed is just the For You page, essentially, from Twitter.
See, that's what I can't tell. I can't tell if it's algorithmic or if it's literally just everyone.
I had the same problem with Notes. I could not figure out what the deal with Substack Notes was. And I got very, very bored of it very quickly because it was just a series of men talking.
I'm also terrified of following anyone on Notes because I don't want to subscribe to new newsletters. And I can't tell if I can't tell what happens if I follow someone. Do I get their Notes feed? Do I get their newsletter? Do I get both? It makes my OCD go insane because I don't know what's happening.
I mean, based on your newsletter metrics that skyrocketed as soon as Notes happened, it's basically a growth hack for newsletters.
Well, I also found out that I don't know if I turned this setting off or if Substack turned this setting off, but I guess a couple months ago when they were rolling out the early version of Notes, it turned my newsletter posts into Notes posts and turned the replies into my comments. So I just scrolled back recently and discovered I have 20 to 30 comments I've never seen on every newsletter post now.
That's unideal.
That's a really crazy idea. I already have a Discord for managing my community, and now I have just a completely unmanageable comment section.
No, you have two unmanageable comments.
Well, the Discord manages itself. I think I've created a pretty authoritarian environment in there where people self-police.
I mean, you have two comment sections on Substack.
Oh, yeah. I also just, I guess, for me, in a Twitter replacement, I need something to bounce off of. I need, something to talk about. And on Notes, there's nothing to talk about other than Twitter.
Yeah, I mean, this is sort of the problem with every version of these. It's the same problem with Mastodon, is that everyone arriving there, the first thing they try and talk about is Twitter. And so it feels like you've never really left, and then you just go...
Yeah, And then you get to Twitter, and it feels like you're just talking about TikToks or the news, which are now just stories about TikToks.
I mean, Twitter is just awful now. Like, it's hilarious how bad it is and how quickly and how little he has understood his product.
I definitely have been feeling it fade, but when I came to the UK, it used to be that I would open up Twitter and there would just be British Twitter, because I followed a lot of people over the course of 4 years here. I open up Twitter now in the mornings, and there's just nothing. It's just Sky News auto tweets.
I mean, that's bizarre, because that is not my experience of it, but that may be because I have unfollowed a lot of the news. Well, I never followed a lot of the news outlets because they're annoying, and then the reporters are the better people to follow. But it's, I don't know, the whole thing is so bizarre. It's really hard to parse exactly what's happened to Twitter, but just every single decision he's made suggests that he does not understand what Twitter is. Like, the API one is the kind of the one that jumps out for me as being insane, because he is charging $42,000 a month for the Twitter API, and which at first sounds like, okay, that doesn't seem that like crazy, but what it means is that, for example, if you're a news publisher and you use Socialflow or EchoBox or one of the other things, or if you're like someone who has their own like data product, like I don't know, the Guardian do with Ofen, or the FT do with Lantern and stuff, all of them are using the plugin for Twitter. And what it means is charging $2,000 a month. It is so much that it does not make sense for essentially anyone. Like, there are very few products. Like, I mean, so EchoBox is one of them, and EchoBox published a public thing which basically said, look, we have roughly 2,000 people working with us, which means that $42,000 a month is, what does that work out at? $21 each. So every company, they have to charge an extra $21 a month to, which sort of doesn't sound like a lot, but at the same time, that's every single company. That's madness just to keep running. So it then stops making sense for publishers to work with EchoBox. It stops making sense for people to have their own thing, like their own mechanic for interacting with Twitter. They stop using it, which means it just makes it harder to use Twitter for essentially everyone. And yeah.
And the benefits of using Twitter have never been particularly good. I've said this in various capacities over the last 6 months. I feel like I'm just once again, I feel like I'm just talking in circles about the same bullshit over and over. But the only benefit of Twitter, really, was that your boss was on there. So if you had a good idea, your boss could be pressured by his boss or her boss to commission that idea if it went viral. Or like you could report from the ground directly to Twitter. I did that a lot in the mid-2010s. Like, I would file a story via tweets. But even that wasn't great, because then your shit just gets picked up by other outlets. So, like, I don't see a real benefit for a media outlet on Twitter now, and I didn't really see one 10 years ago, really.
I slightly disagree. I think that Twitter was very good at one specific thing, which was audience building for individuals. And I don't think anything's ever replaced that, because basically reporting a lot, whether it's from the ground, whether it's like posting things on there, it is very good at kind of building up a name and being like, okay, we know who this person is. And I think for outlets, it's very, very good at it's good at seeding stuff. Like, you can start talking about stuff, and you put stuff there, and it can kind of, it gathers momentum and then goes to other platforms.
Just think of all the prospective BoJack Horseman writers that we're missing out on by having a not functioning Twitter.
Yeah, the loss is incalculable.
So many twee book deals not being commissioned right now. I have looked at most Twitter alternatives at this point. Post News doesn't make any fucking sense. It's basically just like Tumblr, but slow and for like college professors. Mastodon, I lost interest with almost immediately. Notes is promising in the sense that I can use it as like a backbone for publishing on Substack, but also I don't get it. Blue Sky is pretty janky, but I could see myself using it more because like there's like funny stuff there. But then I'm also just like tired. I'm pre-exhausted at the idea of starting a new thing somewhere.
I guess so. I mean, it kind of depends like how much your audience follows you, because if it's essentially just replicating the I think posting on like Mastodon and Post News and Substack Notes and Blue Sky and Twitter is like madness. But at some point, one of those things will be the replacement for Twitter, or a replacement for Twitter. I vaguely feel like they're going to silo a bit. Like, you'll end up with kind of, I don't know, academic nerds talking on Substack notes. You'll end up with shit posters on Blue Sky. You'll end up with news organizations on Mastodon, or whatever combination it pans out as. And I can kind of see that happening. But it's more probable that like one of them will be the one that most people are on.
I'm more worried that like everyone stays on Twitter, but they just use it to promote where they're posting on the Twitter alternatives, which you're already sort of seeing. Like, there are people who've replaced their display name with like their Mastodon handle or their Blue Sky handle, and they're still posting on Twitter. And I'm like, I'm not going to go find out what you're posting on Mastodon, but how could it be any different than this?
Well, it doesn't have to be. It can't be. Like, it isn't. Like, this is kind of the whole point. It doesn't have to be different. We're just waiting for the next thing to happen because Twitter is. I mean, is it unrecoverable now? Do you think? Do you think like there is no way to make Twitter good again?
Well, so much of it feels broken in a way that feels almost impossible to fix. The verification thing, I think, is like truly. I don't know. I keep looking for like a point of no return with this stuff, and I'm thinking maybe that's what it is. Like, to break that system to a point where I don't think you could fix it. I mean, although I have heard that there's still a list of who was legacy verified that you can access before they switched it. But like, imagine buying Twitter and reverting it to the way it looked in 2019. The amount of effort. I don't see anyone wanting to do that either. Like, I don't see any scenario where a person buys Twitter from Elon Musk or whatever and reverts it back. And by the time that would happen, I think the world would just move on.
I mean, the fundamental problem with what he's done here, which is basically figure out a way to make people pay for it, which is not crazy. Like, I probably would have paid $1 a month to just access Twitter. Like, I would have, like, I think I probably would have done that.
What?
Like, no, so like, you can't use Twitter unless you pay $1 a month. There's probably a number that I would have paid.
I guess $1. I don't. Maybe $2 a month, not a week.
But instead, what he's done is set up a system whereby, I mean, just every single thing makes no sense. So he set up a verification system, which is because verification is important or like a valuable thing to have. But by doing that, he has made verification no longer valuable to have, which means that no one is paying for it, which is why he's now re-verified everyone with over 1 million followers except Jack Dorsey, which is... That's the funniest bit he's ever done. Like, nothing here he's done has been funny, but that is funny. But what that means is that if you want to pay for it, firstly you pay for it so that your posts get more visibility, which makes the Twitter experience worse. Like, if your posts regularly go out of your, like, circle, they become brigaded by crazy people, and it's awful, and it's a very unpleasant thing. So you're paying, if you're a regular Twitter user, you're paying for your posts to be worse, but you're also paying for a service which has started to algorithmically hide the better posts because it is boosting posts from other people who pay, which by default are worse because they're not interesting, which means that every single tweet after it has like 500 people saying nothing.
Yes.
And it's awful, which means there's no conversation anymore. So you've created a social media platform in which conversation is de-incentivized, which is, it makes no sense. You're asking people to pay for a product that makes your experience worse and simultaneously is making the product you're paying for worse.
We talked a little bit about this when it first launched, but there's an insurrection quality to this whole thing because it feels like everyone wanted to tear this thing apart and trash it, and then they did. And then the morning after 420, hilariously, on 421, all of the blue checks had a meltdown when they realized that the celebrities weren't going to pay. So all of a sudden, they just flipped Twitter inside out. And there was this, like, kind of disgusting feeling on the site. Like, it felt gross to be like, oh, like, these people have trashed this place because they spent the pandemic fetishizing a blue cartoon check mark. And now it's broken and can't really be fixed in any capacity that would matter. And I don't know, it's a bummer. It feels weird. And trying to replace it with something else feels equally weird because, like, I don't know, I'm like losing the interest in doing it. I'm like every day trying to remember what I used to do on Twitter.
Yeah, I mean, one interesting thing is, do you still use TweetDeck?
I do.
So, TweetDeck is very odd because it kind of works outside the algorithms. So it just is relatively static. You know, you got lots of lists, lots of notifications, stuff, but you can just see the change in it. So it's kind of like a window that stays the same, but you just see a change rather than kind of like actually being inside the change. And just the character of everything is wrong. And I mean, you're right about kind of the insurrection feeling, but it's also kind of the insurrection feeling that there was an insurrection and they grabbed something and said, "Aren't you sad you've lost this?" And everyone was like, "No, not really."
I mean, as an American, I have a slightly different feeling about the insurrection and the scenes of people trashing the Capitol. But yeah, I suppose it's...
No, the insurrection on Twitter.
Oh, yeah.
Not the actual physical insurrection. The insurrection on Twitter, which, yeah, like, an awful lot of people are like, we have this now. We have verification. We have the blue check marks. And everyone's like, okay. We never really cared about them, to be brutally honest.
People got really mad at me because I was like, it's really weird if you have under 100 followers and you pay $8 a month to be on Twitter Blue. And everyone's like, oh, I'm sorry, that's really elitist. Oh, I guess we can't be as important as you, former intern at a digital media company in 2010 or whatever. And it's like, no, you don't get it. Like, if you have I think 100 followers is like the bare minimum for a website, a public website. Not a website where you're talking to your friends and family, not like a WhatsApp group chat, but like a public-facing feed of content where you're talking on it all day. And I've seen people with Twitter Blue checkmarks who've been on the site since 2011, are paying for Twitter Blue, have 75 followers, and now they're just getting their replies to, like, I fucking love science posts boosted, and they're awful. And it's like, I don't know. Maybe you shouldn't have spent the last 15 years on Twitter posting absolute garbage shit all. Like, I don't know. I don't think that's elitist to say. Not everyone's a good poster.
The number of people who think that posts by previously verified people did well because they were verified rather than being good posts is utterly, utterly fascinating.
In fact, like, we've gone so far now that I think a lot of people forget that a lot of people who are randomly verified were randomly verified because they got to a level of popularity where they had to be.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of other people in there. There were plenty of verified people who were also bad posters, but they didn't have the followers. But if you're looking at, I don't know, Chrissy Teigen, who, for better or worse, is a poster who incites engagement on her posts, let's say that. But, like, the reason is that, like, the posts are engaging, not that she is verified, therefore the posts do better. And it's, I mean, there was that thing that went around, I think you might have tweeted it, the Steve Albini thing, where someone was like, why is Steve Albini getting so much more engagement given that I have a blue check? And it's like, because he's a more interesting person and a better poster than you. Like, that's the whole thing. Steve
Albini is slightly more interesting than Craig from Florida.
Yeah, exactly. God, it's a hell site, and yet we're still all there. Like, I don't know what point I will actually leave. Like, I don't know all that many people who have left.
Well, I was thinking about this today. I was one of the last holdouts on MySpace because I was using it to manage a page for like a screamo band I was in around 2009. And I do remember like eventually giving up on it and saying to myself, like, I don't remember the last day I logged into MySpace, but I remember like there was just a time where I wasn't using it and I was kind of bored on the internet, and then I discovered Tumblr. And that kind of replaced it. And the reason I got really into Tumblr was because all my actual real life friends were on it. And so I'm sort of waiting for that moment. But I'm also now 33, not 19. So I think it's like a little harder to find that. But then also I have group chats, so I don't really need that. That's the existential quandary I'm in at the moment. Is that like I can't figure out where I'm gonna need that again, and it's a weird feeling.
I mean, yeah, but there is a certain... I think the appeal of it is still, at a certain point, you wake up and you're like, what is happening and what is everyone talking about? And the place to go for that has always been Twitter, and I think that is the functionality that has not been replicated elsewhere. And maybe it will, maybe it'll be like Blue Sky and you go in and you're like, oh, everyone's saying interesting things. Like, you know, Substack Notes, you go in and everyone's just like inhaling their own farts.
It's a lot of graphs, I've noticed.
Well, I mean, I like graphs, but it's just everyone's talking about their own shit and not about the thing that's happening, and I'm just like, none of this feels current.
There's no like meta conversation.
Right, exactly. And where else do you go for the meta conversation? I don't know. It feels like it's still Twitter, and until it's not.
It's probably TikTok.
But TikTok, your algorithm is so strong that you don't understand the thing that's happening. Like, it takes a while for your For You page to be taken over by the meta conversation. The meta conversation is like everyone posting like Wes Anderson, and it's not a thing that is like you can't have a conversation about it. It's just a thing that happens.
Did you do a Wes Anderson video?
I don't use TikTok.
Yeah, me neither. Although I think that's probably a pretty good segue to talk about AI now. It's probably time, huh?
The next most powerful thing in the world after TikTok algorithm.
So I'm in London this week, in case anyone's curious, to talk about AI at a conference called the Observe Summit. And every time I do these talks, I get asked, like, how do you stay up to date on AI? And I'm like, random people on Twitter, which is a bad answer because, like, that's going away too. But also, it gets really uncomfortable when I talk to people about AI because, like, at first they're like, oh, this is so cool, this is so exciting. And then as, like, the conversation goes deeper, it starts to get uncomfortable because I think they start to realize that, like, a lot of what they do on a daily basis can kind of perfunctorily be done by one of these tools in a way that is, like, becoming increasingly noticeable, especially in, like, the branded world.
So I was at a stag do a few weeks ago, and I feel like they're an extremely good insight because you basically meet a bunch of people.
Yeah.
Usually from someone's life, but you see, like, a bunch of people from just very different backgrounds, very different use cases. Like, you don't talk to just only internet nerds, you talk to, like, a wide variety of people. And the number of people who were functionally using AI in their job every day was startling. It's such a thing that has captured... I know it's captured a group of people, but people are kind of like, yeah, no, if I need to write anything that's a little bit boring or whatever, I will make some bullet points, I will stick it into the AI, it will pull it out, polish it up, and I will send it. And people use it to automate, like, chunks of their work. And just everyone's spoken about it, everyone has, like, tried it. You know, you speak to a bartender or a hairdresser or anyone is using it. And it's that, I think, was something that I was not expecting for it to happen that quickly. But because it just speaks to the level of things that can be automated. Like, obviously, those people have jobs they still need to do with their hands for the moment, so it doesn't matter so much. But I don't know, we're not ready for it.
I was getting a haircut here in London this week, and the barber was talking about AI and how he uses it, like, all the time. And what's really funny is, like, a lot of people in America, a lot of people in the media in America, actually, that I talk to are like, it's fine, we've got time, people aren't using it, there's no one app for it, it's not like it's built into your phone or whatever, no one's really using this stuff. But then you, like, leave that bubble and you talk to, like, any normal person in a white-collar job, and they're like, yeah, ChatGPT does, like, half my job for me.
I mean, Tom Scott did a very good video about this, where he kind of put together the various different elements, and he kind of led to a point of, well, there's this idea called the Sigma curve, which is basically...
Oh, it's for Sigma males who get cooler?
It's the S-curve of progress, which is basically stuff progresses very, very slowly, and then very, very quickly, and then very, very slowly again. So, for example, smartphones, your phone between, like, I don't know, 1990 and 2005 essentially did not change. Then between 2005 and 2010, it suddenly became your entire life because it became the iPhone and became a smartphone. And then between 2010 and now, it's essentially the same thing, just the camera's a little bit better. Like,
that makes sense, yeah.
Yeah, you kind of have this big thing. And what we don't know with AI is exactly where on that curve we are. If we are just at the bit where it starts to accelerate, there's a lot of stuff to come. If we're near the top and it's kind of like, actually, this is basically all AI is ever going to be for a while, then it's like, okay, this is interesting. There's some bits and pieces it's going to help with. There's a fun new tool, but it's essentially an augmentation thing. But if we're on the other side and it's about, and we are like, have, 90% of the acceleration to go, then we are in a very different world.
I had a meeting a couple weeks ago with a guy who kind of got into AI through, like, the marketing world, and now he's, like, AI full time. And we were getting to know each other and having coffee, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna drop a little kind of hot take on this guy and see how he reacts. And I was just like, if you have an AI startup If you have an AI startup that isn't its own model, right? Like if you have an app using GPT-4's API or whatever, you can't have a 5-year plan because there's a very good possibility that within 5 years the limiting, the alignment that you're doing on that API could just be done by the prompt itself. And then if you follow that logic further, you start to realize that if this thing gets good enough, which I have seen no indication that it's not and can't be, the chatbot interface, at least as we see it right now, could very well be just the interface for all apps. Like, at a certain level of AI chatbot proficiency, you don't actually need apps. You don't need SaaS, almost, because it can just do it.
Yeah, there are so many bits and pieces of...
Oh, I learned what SaaS was over the break.
Great. So there are so many bits and pieces of like kind of plugins that you can do and ways it can change. But yeah, if you start to build into like software, like the idea of putting, there's so many. Okay, so OpenAI have they're currently training GPT-5. The last I heard, it was going to be December. Some of the people within OpenAI, a small minority of people, think that GPT-5 may be AGI.
Define it.
AGI is artificial general intelligence, and that is the point at which the AI is kind of God. Because, yeah, at that point, it can then start to write programs to improve itself. And if it does that, then within a very short period, it becomes God, essentially. And maybe it's not GPT-5, maybe it's GPT-6, maybe it's GPT-7, maybe it's GPT-8, maybe it's something else. But it does feel like we're going to get there. And on the way there, like everything is going to, I don't know. It's genuinely, I find like when I think about it, I feel like I'm standing on a cliff. Like it is terrifying.
I met some people from OpenAI, and then I had, this is not even a joke, I had like legitimate stress dreams about AI for like 3 nights afterwards. But way back, when we started to understand that we had moved into the second phase of web development, Web 2.0, I believe it was Tim Berners-Lee. I can't Google this because I'm in a park right now. But I believe it was Tim Berners-Lee who came up with the idea of the semantic web being next. The idea that the next phase would be an internet in which everything could be talked to. And he mainly thought of this as a way to replace HTML. But when you start to really dig into what like GPT-4 can do, like I spent like an afternoon coding with it. And I've used it for other small tasks. I don't use it for writing or anything, but I use it for like usually coding because I can't code and I want to code and I want to learn how to do it. You start to realize that like if this thing is good enough, which it almost is, there is not a lot of need for technical knowledge to build things, and if it can deploy things, which certain versions of GPT-4 can do, like that story where it called a TaskRabbit.
Yeah,
like these things can already be done in some capacity, and you can start to like fill in the blanks and realize, oh, like there's absolutely a world where your main interface with all of your devices, all of the internet, is just a little chat window, and that is a profound thing to start to wrap your head around. I think
it's really profound, and it also speaks to the extent to which like it can rewrite just everything, just every job. Like, I mean, if you have like someone whose job is to, I don't know, analyze data for you're in a bank and the person is like a data analyst, that person can be automated very easily, and it'll be better and it'll be quicker and it'll be more robust. And as soon as you start to apply it, like, is this thing smart enough to do X job, it becomes very quickly clear that it's smart enough to do essentially any job. And it just also means that everything we're doing right now is kind of redundant. So obviously this affects like kind of news media, so it's what we kind of think about more. But there is a push right now to make Google and Facebook and other big tech companies pay more for the content that they excerpt on social media sites or on search sites. It's kind of a way to redress the balance of Google and Facebook eating the entire ad market. But that push is kind of happening now. It's broadly speaking, like maybe it's interesting, maybe it's a good thing. They're really struggling. They've done it a bit in Australia, and they're really struggling to make the economics work. Google and Facebook are. So they're kind of leaning towards, we're actually just not going to pay and not going to use your stuff. And it's a very bad time for that to be happening, because at that time, AI is going to come along and replace a huge extent of that functionality. So we're going to have the same thing that just happened to the digital ad market, as we've kind of finally figured out some media business models that work. Not many, and not for most people, but kind of just hinting at it. It's only something else going to come along and rewrite it. And it's the same in absolutely every industry, that everything we're building now in... You say you kind of have a 5-year plan if you have an AI app. Like, can you have a 5-year plan for anything? Like, if you're a bank, like if you're a bank, in 5 years, if the AI is good enough, in 2 years, if the AI is good enough, you're suddenly going to be looking at replacing a bunch of people with an AI. And, yeah.
So I have a theory that I've been calling the alt weekly theory, which is this idea that in the 90s in America, TV was culturally just dominant. You had the start of MTV, it was this cool thing, and then it grew in the mid-2000s to become just like everything was television. And at the same time, you started to have the rise of like very un-television, very un-mass appeal products, whether it was the comic book industry, indie filmmaking, alt weeklies. You had this like very intense desire subculturally for things that were not mass market products. And I don't think it's an accident that we're seeing a return to blogging, popular creators, niche online internet creators, whatever, Substack people, at the same time that we're also seeing possibly the final form of mass entertainment, which is just a chatbot that we're all using.
The final form of mass entertainment is a Marvel movie created by AI.
That's right. It's an avatar that I get inside of, and then I watch myself have sex with Marilyn Monroe. That's the future of movies, folks. But no, I think that what you're going to have is you're going to have people who crave human content. They're not going to be nearly as profitable or as big as the folks who are fine getting all of their content via a chatbot. But that dynamic that we've seen over the last 15 years of Facebook versus not Facebook, or viral media versus not viral media, is just going to continue, but it's just going to be human and not human.
I think that's probably correct, but I just think it's going to affect more industries than that. Like, we always think about it from a content perspective.
Because all there is in life is content. Consuming it, making it, sharing it.
But, like, it's actually genuinely kind of interesting outside, because I'm kind of looking around to see, like, just literally different businesses and different houses and different things. And I just keep thinking that in every single one of these, there are 60% of the people who can be automated. There are exceptions. Like, I think you will struggle for a long time to automate a bar. I think you will not struggle to automate a law firm, a bank, a human resource, a recruitment firm. Like, all this stuff is going to have a huge degree of like automation, and I don't know how we go through that. And yeah, it's what I talk about, like kind of standing on the edge of a cliff. I think that the degree of automation we may see in the next few years is going to be on a par with the Industrial Revolution.
But it will give people more time to use Twitter.
People won't be able to afford it. Because like the economic collapse associated with it is also astronomical. I don't know. I don't think we're going to gain. Whenever we've seen this stuff happen before, it turns out you gain additional capacity for the humanity as a whole. Humanity can do more things because it has this tool. Simultaneously, for the vast majority of people involved with it, their life gets worse. And you don't gain, if you automate 60% of the people, you don't gain 60% on top. You gain 20% on top and take 40% off the people who already exist. And yeah, I don't know. It's hard to think about, I think, because it's tough.
I have to stop myself when I write about it, because your brain can start to fill in the blanks, because we know how this goes. Yeah. We've seen it so many times in some capacity over my lifetime. And you're right. I don't know where people go. I don't know what people do if this thing works. But then there's the other thing, which is that this thing might not work. The processing power required for everyone to be using generative AI is outrageous. There's not... I've been sort of describing it as like an arms race in two directions. There's the arms race to make the AI smarter, and there's the arms race to make the AI run on a calculator or a potato. Because if you can't get it to run without an internet connection... Well, I mean, it's kind of useless. Also, if you can't get the AI to speak your own language, that's a whole other thing. Like right now, AI is predominantly best in English, and it's most usable to people who have LTE or 5G internet connections on mobile devices, or a computer at home that has that. But for most of the world, that's not the case. They're not speaking English. So
this is the AI problem, though, is that if you make the AI smart enough, it solves the problem. Like, the AI will be smart enough to figure out the processing power problem. It will be smart enough to figure out the language problem. Like, it can do it. This is the bit where it gets really unnerving and where it feels like the cliff keeps getting bigger.
Have you heard the Waluigi thing?
You'll have to expand.
So
I've heard many Waluigi things.
So this one isn't sexual. This is so the Waluigi idea is that to train an AI, which in this case would be Luigi, you have to come up with an infinite amount of Waluigis to make it safe. So evil uses of the AI. So whenever someone discovers a new Waluigi, it's basically another way of describing like jailbreaking it to do something bad.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the course of human history, particularly around tech, when we think of things that look exciting and good, they end up being boring and bad. And I think if you default to assuming that AI will end up being boring and bad, I think you will probably not go far wrong.
Yeah, that sounds right. Hey, Luke, have you consumed any content to stay sane?
I watched the entirety of Ted Lasso so I can talk about it to you.
Let's get into it. So, who's your favorite boy on Ted Lasso?
I hate them all. It is one. I knew I was going to dislike it, and I was surprised by my level of vitriol for it. I despise it. It is one of the worst things I have ever seen. Now, I'm not specifically. I'm gonna like wipe out the football stuff. I get that bits of it are going to be like a bit Americanized because they need to. I'm not talking about the football. I'm assessing it purely as like a workplace comedy with some fish out of water elements in the kind of UK US thing. It is fucking awful. It is atrocious. It is okay. So if you write a comedy but give it the tone of a drama, you end up with satire. You end up with Succession. If you write a drama in the tone of a comedy, you end up with something that is essentially made for 5-year-olds, and that is Ted Lasso. Every single person who likes it has dramatically diminished my opinion of them because I think that it is one of the worst things ever made. It is execrable.
So, okay, hold on. The first season of Ted Lasso arrived towards the tail end of the peak of the pandemic. And I remember really liking it because, I went through a lot of the things that Ted went through his first year in London because you people are space aliens. And it's an adjustment to live here. And I'm a friendly guy that everybody likes, just like Ted. And turns out I also have some anxiety, just like Ted Lasso. Fantastic. Who has it? What American who's lived here hasn't had a panic attack at a British karaoke bar? It's a universal experience. It is the true American immigrant story in London. Then I watched the second season. And I thought, this feels a little different, doesn't it? And I was like, well, it's still nice, still fun. There's the Coach Beard episode. That's interesting. Then I started watching this season. And now I'm beginning to seriously consider that I had severe brain damage for like the last 3 years.
So, absolutely no judgment on whatever content anyone needed to consume to get through a pandemic. I think everyone had like a joy-shaped hole in their brains, and I think Ted Lasso filled it for a lot of people, and that's fine. I think that now, looking back at it and having not watched it during the pandemic, I think everyone has like basically trauma bonded with it and is not aware of how bad it is because it is fucking awful. And yeah, it speaks to, okay, sure, there are some specific elements of like being an American in London or whatever that kind of speak to a thing, but there's a relatively small number of people. It is not explained like why fucking Joe Biden is bringing him to the White House, but it is something that is, I don't know, it's just bad. It's really bad. Like, I can't, okay, here's what
I have another theory. So during the pandemic, I had finished the first season, and I got a little drunk, and I went on Twitter, as one does, and I laid out a theory that Ted Lasso is almost identical to Scrubs. The characters are all the same.
It's made by Bill Lawrence.
Well, hold on. So I was like, JD is Ted Lasso. He's like a goofy guy who has depression. Look at that. That's crazy. He's got like a jock friend, Coach Beard, Turk. He's got like a rough mentor, Roy, Dr. Cox. And he's got kind of like an acerbic, fun girlfriend at the time, Kaylee. But then there's also like the meathead, Jamie Tart, and that surgeon that doesn't wear a shirt. And then it's like the owner and the owner's henchman, Rebecca, and like bald Rebecca friend.
He's not bald, but I know the guy you mean.
Yeah. Anyway, so I laid it all out, and Bill Lawrence responded. and was like, I don't think that's true. which means it is. Which means it is, and he knows it. And Bill Lawrence has a problem. As a longtime Scrubs watcher, I loved it for a while, and then it got unwatchably bad, and then it had a pretty good final episode. The reason Scrubs got so bad is because Bill Lawrence has a fatal flaw that is true for Scrubs, it's true for Cougar Town, it's beginning to be true in even the first season of his other show, Shrinking, which is that Bill Lawrence lets his actors do whatever the fuck they want because he's having a good time on set. There were no scripts being written for the last seasons of Scrubs because everyone's just having a fun time on set, which explains why Rebecca is singing all the time in the new episodes of Ted Lasso. It explains why they're just like letting everyone riff and having a nice time. And clearly, I think Jason Sudeikis is just making up bad puns.
Right, so this is a big part of it, is like he absolutely loves making a pun or a reference to something, and that is the entire joke. It is very reminiscent of Family Guy when they just used to make references rather than actually write a joke. There are no fucking jokes in this thing. There's nothing funny. And if you actually think about it and like try and quote a funny line, you can't, because there aren't any, because it's not fucking funny. And then alongside that, his inability to like think about characters beyond very basic archetypes is embarrassing, which I think particularly manifests itself in the two female characters on the show, both of whom are solely defined by their relationships to men, and their entire plotline is them either trying to get over divorce or get a boyfriend. And that's the entire thing. Or keep a boyfriend, to be fair. But, like,
yeah,
the first two seasons of that show, they have two female characters who randomly get together to talk about boys. And it's, I think, offensive.
There's also, like, a certain thing that I'm very acutely aware of after, you know, working for an American company managing British people, that I found that when you take British people and you kind of give them the fake feel-good environment of an American workplace, things start to get kind of goofy. And that goofiness I'm seeing once again in the later episodes of Ted Lasso, where I'm literally wondering if some of these actors are coming in and being like, well, I've never gotten a chance to do this before. Can I do this on camera? Can I play a stand-up bass at a jazz bar in Amsterdam for some fucking reason? Can I sing in a Christmas special that I think is honestly one of the worst pieces of television ever created in history? So yeah, I agree with you. Ted Lasso's not good. I think I had brain damage.
It was a pandemic watch, and that's fine. If it's a pandemic watch and you enjoyed it at the pandemic watch, that's fine. But I think anyone starting it now will be looking at it and being like, what the fuck are you all talking about? Because it is bad.
Well, also, I think you don't want to talk about the football thing, but I think it truly is that the show is interesting when it's about an American guy trying to manage a British football team to some sort of success. But they clearly can't write that because I think they don't know how, or they don't think Americans would care. But when they stop caring about that stuff, the show doesn't make any sense. It's like, why am I watching this? I don't care about these people. I care about the story of the football team. I want to know what happens with the football team.
I also think, I was saying this the other day, but I also think that they kind of got screwed by Welcome to Wrexham, because Welcome to Wrexham is so good, and it's so real, and it's so interesting, and it speaks to exactly the kind of, like, the beauty and devastation of being a fan of like a small club and how lower leagues work and that sort of stuff. It's Welcome to Wrexham is probably up there with like Sunderland Till I Die, maybe one or two others in terms of like being genuinely a brilliant football documentary. And yeah, and I think now comparing the two of them, one of them is just like mawkish and sentimental and shit, and one of them is beautiful, and it's I think as a result, like the football stuff particularly makes it look much, much worse in comparison.
Well, I think the main thing is that Welcome to Wrexham was created by two people who care about football. And I don't really get any indication that people working for Ted Lasso care about the football setting, considering it was literally a Super Bowl ad, and they just like came up with like a funny place to put the character from the Super Bowl ad.
Well, yeah, I mean, the thing is, actually, when I say there are no jokes in it, there are jokes. There are jokes in the very first episode of it. And all those jokes are taken from the Super Bowl ad from, like, 10 years ago.
Remember that?
Yeah, well, I mean...
Remember that funny ad?
I mean, I do, because he actually went to manage Tottenham.
That's your team.
Yeah, because he was, like, sees Gareth Bale, and he goes, Gareth Bale, he's English, right? And he's like, no, he's Welsh. And then he goes, how many countries are in this country? And the answer's 4. And that's a funny line.
5 if you count the Isle of Man.
Yeah, exactly. No one's sure. But, like, it is a funny line, and that line is just repeated verbatim in the first episode. And that's the last time there's a joke in the show.
He makes cookies, you know.
It's not a joke. He's just making a fucking cookie. There's nothing funny about it.
And he's like, "What's cooking? Good looking. I made you a cookie."
But like the whole point about it is he's like he pretends that he's bought the cookies, and then it turns out, and the funny punchline is that actually he's made the cookies, and it's sweet and it's sentimental and it's saccharine and it's shit because it's not a fucking joke.
Well, the joke is that he's a nice guy.
That's not a fucking joke. None of this shit's a joke.
I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. We're sitting in a park. The sun actually came out, which is really nice. I think we tried to cut out all the sounds of ambulances and police cars. And there was one woman who sat next to us for a while just having a full-on phone conversation. And I made eye contact with her several times, but she didn't seem to take the hint. But yeah, we're still free. We're still out of the content mines. We'll come back probably again. Hopefully not to just talk about AI and Twitter again, but it's possible that that's literally all anyone's going to be talking about in the world of tech for the rest of our lives.
Yeah, at some point those two stories are going to collide as well. That's going to be fun.
Oh, do you care about Marvel stuff anymore?
I'm struggling to. I don't know, like, Ant-Man Quantumania did something to me that made me reconsider the whole thing.
Ant-Man Quantumania felt a lot like watching Rise of Skywalker in theater, when I was like, oh no. Oh no. I don't know if I like any of this stuff anymore. Who knows, though? There's a Guardians movie coming out. Why are there so many sirens? All right. We'll see you guys next time. Maybe another couple months. Goodbye.
Yeah, bye.